Well, good morning. Is the microphone on? Yeah, it is. There you go. Here's a little factoid. Human behavior is sometimes illogical. I think we all agree with that. Yeah, I have those chuckles, I guess. Sometimes it's a bit erratic, you know? It's hard to figure out exactly what's going on. It feels like sometimes the choices we make are short-sighted. And all of that actually ends up adding to the chaos of the world around us, unfortunately. Adds to what our world currently is. So there's many reasons why this is the case, you know. But one reason I think often gets overlooked is this. Whether we realize it or not, there is something gnawing away at each and every one of us as humans. Something that causes us a deep level of existential pain and dread. It's the pronouncement that was given against our species at the beginning of time when God said to us, "You shall surely die. You shall surely die." Each one of us, whether we acknowledge it or not, we know that we're going to die. You know, it's not just, that we're going to die. It's that we know we're going to die. And that fact causes a lot of problems in our world. Because how can you live with such a mortal threat to your existence just looming over the horizon? Some people decide in light of this that they need to make a name for themselves. They need to establish a reputation that's going to last beyond them. When they die, last beyond them and endure. And they're willing to conquer whoever they can in order to establish that reputation. They're willing to hurt anybody in the process. Others can't cope with this impending doom, understandably so. And so they medicate themselves, they distract themselves so they don't have to feel the weight of that. Which is understandable, and yet it hurts the people around them and hurts themselves. It hurts ourselves, because we all do that. Others refuse to acknowledge that impending doom is coming, and they live as though they're going to be young forever. But that's not true. And of course, others seek to find as much pleasure as they can on their short time here on earth, because that's obviously the only thing that can matter. And they're willing to do anything and to use anybody in order to achieve that aim. Although the world reacts in many ways to this fact, the fact still remains. We are going to die. So then how do we live? How do we, as Christians, followers of Christ? I mean, here's the thing. We are going to die too. We're going to die as well. We're all going to die. And we also know we're going to die. How do we grapple with this fact? Do we try to medicate ourselves to not feel that weight? Do we try to establish a name for ourselves, no matter who we hurt in the process? Do we choose to eat, drink, and be merry because tomorrow we'll die? These are all options. But if we do, we add to the chaos of this world. Is there another way for us to grapple with our mortality, with the fact that we're going to die? Well, if you have a Bible, please turn to Psalm 90. Psalm 90. Psalm 90 is actually a prayer. Not just any old prayer. It is a prayer of Moses. Moses, the man of God. If anybody on this earth had established a name for himself in the annals of history, it would be this man Moses. This obscure sheep man who was called by God and raised up to free a people from slavery to a superpower. He's the man, he's the myth, he's the legend, right? Even people who don't know much about the Bible, they know about Moses. Everyone's heard about Moses. But while it's understandable to look at the achievements of such a man, were these the focus of this man of God? No, they were not. And as Moses himself wrestled with the issue of his mortality, it was not to deeds done through him that he placed his hope. It was not in having a name that transcends time. It was not in pleasure or in youth or any other coping mechanism that Moses placed his confidence in. No, Moses' confidence, his only confidence when he was wrestling with his mortality, and our only confidence as we do the same, is God. So let's just kind of dive in here, and we're going to take a look. This is a very intimate window that we see here into this person's prayer to the living God. It's fascinating. We're seeing a person's prayer who's wrestling deeply with the fact that he knows he's going to die. How does Moses start his prayer? We see in verse 1 here, and I'm reading from the ESV. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. As Moses struggles with the fear and the pain of being this finite creature who is bound to die, the first thing Moses does is basically forget everything and focus his mind solely on God. As it will become apparent, the issue of mortality is clearly impacting Moses at this moment. He is processing pain, as this psalm will continue. And before he starts anything, he focuses his mind and reminds himself that his master has always been a stable rock, a firm foundation, a lasting dwelling place, and a refuge for both himself and for his people. He reminds himself of this. As generations come and as generations go, one thing remains constant and firm. Before the mountains were formed and into the endless ages of time, one thing remains sure: Yahweh is God. Yahweh is God. For a person wrestling with their mortality, who better to consult than the God who is, who was, and who will evermore be? Okay, so he addresses God here. So what does this Moses, this man of God, have to say to this eternal, ageless creator of all things? Well, he talks about the doomed condition of humanity. And what is kind of shocking is he kind of places some blame on God. He blames God a little bit for his mortal condition. Looking at verse 3 here, he says, "You return man to dust and say, 'Return, O children of man.'" The term that he uses here for dust, it actually denotes that which has been crushed and pulverized, like being ground down to a pulp, piece by piece, ground by ground. Can you feel the truth of that statement in your life? As you age, do you not feel this being the case in yourself? Being crushed piece by piece? And who's the one doing it? Moses says it's the ageless God. And he continues, "For 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past, or as a watch in the night." You know, whenever I read that phrase there, I often read it positively, as a statement of God's eternality. I view it positively. But yet for Moses, this phrase almost kind of accuses God of a sense of indifference. The things that are done on earth are just of such little significance. So much so that 1,000 years of them are just like yesterday, or like a short watch in the night. It's as if, see, the thing is, that's a bold statement, because for us this is not insignificant. We deal with pains, hopes, joys. There's accomplishments. There's heartaches. There's wars. Our species goes through a lot. And yet, 1,000 years of our lifetimes, it just seems like something so insignificant to an eternal God. Now, I'm not sure, I don't think Moses is telling us that this is actually how God views this, but this is how he feels. This is how he feels. And in prayer, he's being honest with how he's feeling. He's pouring out his soul to God. And he's not done. We have verse 5. You sweep them away as with a flood. They are like a dream, like grass that is renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes and is renewed. In the evening it fades and withers. It's just like the passage that we just read from Isaiah, right? It's like you and I, we are like grass. We start off, we grow with such potential, life and vitality, but as the scorching heat rises up, it beats down on that blade of grass, beats down upon it, and all that vigor and all that potential, it's just drained away, swept away like a flood, as transient and as forgotten as a dream. You could tell Moses is in some deep existential pain here. In deep existential pain. He's meditating on his mortality, and it's causing him pain. One wonders if Moses writes this psalm as the Israelites are wandering in the desert. And, he is witnessing a whole generation of Israelites dying before him while wandering in the desert, while he himself is wrestling with the issue of God telling him that he will also die in the desert, that he will not enter into the promised land. Whatever it is that Moses is dealing with here, he is dealing with it. And it's causing him pain. These accusations that he's kind of leveling against God, it makes me almost reread verse 1 in a different way. In verse 1, he's basically saying, God, you are our refuge. But in light of how he goes on, it's almost like he's saying, God, you are our refuge. How could you have betrayed us like this? We as a people have turned to you, the ageless one, and yet you destroy us. This is some bold talk. And yet Moses is the man of God. So why is God doing this? Why is he taking away the life that he has given to us? Well, the fact is, it's because of our sins that each one of us are doomed to die. It's because we have chosen to rebel against the God of all life, the source of all life. It's because of that we are dying. It's because we are evil. For what does Moses remind himself as he continues to pour out his soul toward God? He says in verse 7, for we are brought to an end by your anger. By your wrath we are dismayed. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins, in the light of your presence. For all of our days pass away under your wrath. We bring our years to an end like a sigh. The years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength 80. Yet their span is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone and we fly away. Do you feel that? Do you feel the disappointment in Moses' whole soul there, in his voice? one ought not to wonder why we age. It's because we're all subject to sin. Every single one of us. Every one of us. Secret sins cannot be hidden. And before a just God, a holy God, we're all in trouble. We're choosing to run away from the God who is the source of all life. Do we expect anything different? And do you feel the pain? Like his line here, we bring our years to an end like a sigh. I mean, can you feel that? Now, I don't think Moses is saying that, being old is only constant misery. I don't think he's saying that. But for those of us here who are a little more aged, can you not sympathize with what Moses is saying? Yeah. I don't think we need to be gloomy pessimists and only seeing darkness, brooding darkness. But nor do I think we should just be naive optimists. Aging is painful. And it's quite apt to describe the end of our years as a sigh. As a sigh. It's like as if there's nothing more to give. As if our strength has been spent. Aging is something to mourn. If Moses mourns it, shouldn't we too? Because our life, it flies away so fast, so fast. Whether it's 70, 80, 90, 100 years, it doesn't matter. It all goes by so fast. Your body breaks down, ground into dust, and we blow away. And the evidence of our mortality is all around us. And then Moses asks this question. It's so apparent to Moses because he's feeling it. He's thinking about it. It's so apparent to him that he raises this question in verse 11. He says, "Who considers the power of your anger and your wrath according to the fear of you?" The fact is that, age is a result of our sin. God is taking back the life that he gave to us. But for most people, they never consider this fact. God is never brought into the equation. People view aging and dying as a natural process. And I understand it. We're all aging and we're all dying. So I understand that. But the reality is that what the Bible's presenting to us is actually the inverse of that. Aging and dying is decidedly unnatural. You and I, we were never designed to die. We were not designed to die. It's the destruction of the good creation that God made. Perhaps part of the reason why it's so painful to watch ourselves age and watch those whom we love age is probably a bit of that. It's not natural, and we sense that in our soul. It's not natural. It's a result of the fall. It's a result of our rebellion against God, against the God who is life. And yet we humans, we so often just don't connect the dots. We don't connect the dots. Generally, we seek to ignore this fact, to ignore the God who's taking back the life that he gave to us. And so often we lean into our rebellion. Let's just eat, drink, and be merry. Let us forget our troubles forever, and let us forget the God of all life. Well, all this reality, our ageless God taking back the life he gave to us as a result of our rebellion, that is the facts that we're living in. That is the reality. We will surely die. Nothing can change that pronouncement. And Moses, what does he do? He chooses to take it all in. To take it all in. And he chooses to feel it. He chooses to feel it. Not to shy away from his emotions. Not to medicate away the painful feelings. No, he chooses to feel it all and to wrestle with God in prayer over it. As he works through this issue, he talks about it to God. He ponders then, how can I live in light of this fact properly? Verse 12. So teach us to number our days that we may get a heart of wisdom. The pronouncement has been made. You and I, we will die. Those we love will die. So Moses, he asks God for the wisdom on how to live. Teach us to number our days, because life is short, very short. We cannot afford to pretend like it is not. No, we must fully acknowledge the shortness of our lives and seek to invest the time in what really matters. There's a quote that from a man who lived 2,000 years ago. Who I love this quote. He says, "We humans have all the fears of mortals, but all the desires of immortals." We have all the fears of mortals, yet all the desires of immortals. Those two sentences cannot coexist. We treat time as a commodity that will just never run out. And so we squander it as though we were going to be living forever. But it will run out. So Moses says here that the first step to living in light of our mortality is acknowledging that fact, is acknowledging it. Number our days. Do not medicate and forget about these facts. Do not try to forget it. Do not try to drown away this sorrow. Do not pretend that you will never age. No, we must number our days. We must feel the fact that our days are numbered. We have to feel that. Okay, so then what? We've numbered our days. We have felt the shortness of our life, and we refuse to distract ourselves from it. Well, what next? What next? How do we make the most of our days? Do we seek to make a name for ourselves? Do we seek to go for pleasure? How do we seek with all of our might what really matters in this world? Is it our actions that matter? Is it what we do? Is it establishing a name for ourselves? No. Moses says no. Because for Moses, numbering one's days, it leads to one refocusing on what truly matters. And what truly matters is not first and foremost what we can do, the name we can make for ourselves. No. The only thing that matters is God. For Moses cries out in verse 13, and feel this. It's kind of disjointed. He says, and literally it's like, "Return, O Yahweh, until when? Have pity on your servants." It's very disjointed. It's like you can feel this struggle going on in Moses' heart. After numbering his days, his perspective is sharpened. His desires, his true desires, clarified. What he needs is Yahweh. Somehow he needs God to return. What does it mean? Until when? How long? Wait, what are you even asking? Until when? I don't understand. Have pity. Like, this verse is disjointed a little bit. It sounds as if Moses doesn't fully understand what he's asking for, but he clearly understands that somehow God is the answer to his mortal dilemma. God is the answer. The very one who returns man to dust is the very one who must return and show pity. And I mean, this makes sense. For if God is the author of life, can he not be the author of new life as well? If God created once before, can he not recreate again? Moses here doesn't seem to know exactly how God is going to deliver his people from their mortal threat. But God has been the refuge for his people throughout all generations. Will he fail to be a refuge now? If through the lesser issues of life, God has proven himself to be a secure dwelling place, will he fail to be so now that Moses wrestles with the final issue of all? Moses does not know how, but he knows that God is the only foundation he has. And whereas others might seek to distract themselves from the fact of their impending death, and distract themselves from the God who's behind it all. Moses embraces his mortality and throws himself at the mercy of a God who can raise the dead back to life. Only God can satisfy his short life meaningfully. As Moses then says in verse 14, satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, that we may rejoice and be glad all the days of our lives. See, God is now in his vision. With God in his vision, now Moses asks God to each morning satisfy him with his steadfast, covenantally faithful love. In the midst of aging and approaching death, the only comfort he now has in both life and in death is that he belongs to his most faithful Lord and Savior. And though each new day brings with it pains, struggles, chaos, sighing, he finds God's steadfast love. In his steadfast love, a satisfaction that allows him to rejoice. He finds an ageless creator who is committed to his good. He goes on, make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us, and for as many years as we have seen evil. Let your work be shown to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands upon us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. Just grounded in this prayer of struggle, Moses works through his mortal angst by appealing to the steadfast love of God. If anything is to be established in life and beyond the grave, it depends upon God establishing the work of our hands. We cannot establish a name for ourselves. Our works of our hands cannot be established. You won't be able to invest. You know your time is short. You know you need to invest every moment in a wise way, but we all waste our time. We will never make the best use of the time we have here on earth. If it's up to us, we're going to struggle, we're going to fall, we're going to fail. It's 100% dependent upon the steadfast love of God toward us. His steadfast love. If anything is to be established in life and death, it is dependent upon God establishing the work of our hands. Only God's work lasts forever. And may God show that work to future generations. That ancient power may be shown to his servants. Throughout all generations, God's kindness and support is required. Only he can establish the work of our hands. Only he can do this. Only he can help us as we face the certainty of our death. You know, Moses' prayer here, it's a whirlwind. It really is. He goes on, he starts off by affirming God as our eternal refuge, to then identifying God as the source of our aging, then to identifying our sin as the reason why God has taken away life from us, to then turning back to God and his steadfast love as our only hope in mortality. The psalm ends the same way it began, trusting in God as our eternal refuge. And through it all, Moses doesn't pretend like things are okay. He doesn't pretend like death will never happen. He doesn't brush this issue under the carpet. He refuses to medicate himself and distract himself from this fact. No, instead, he is dealing with his existential pain in conversation with God. His focus is renewed. His trust in God is reaffirmed in a God who promises to ever be with his people, with aging and death being no exception. You know, we as Christians, we're kind of in a privileged position in that we can look back on this side of Jesus' work on the cross, and we can see how exactly it is that God has conquered death and has given us a hope that surpasses the grave. We're privileged with this. But in a very real sense, Moses was at no disadvantage. He might not have known exactly how Jesus was going to be dealing with death, but he did know God. He knew God. And with a God whose nature is defined by steadfast, covenantally faithful love, Moses could rest assured that throughout his life and even into death, he could endure it all, for Yahweh is with him. And what about you? What about us? As we age, as our life, it drains from us, as our body is no longer able to do all that it once did, to what will you turn? Psalm 90 implores you. It begs you to find rest in your soul in the steadfast love of God. The steadfast love of a God who is with you as you age, who knows you intimately, who has been walking with you from infancy to gray hairs. The psalm tells us that we must have the freedom within ourselves to mourn the demise of our bodies and of those whom we love. Because it's not a natural thing. And yet, as we mourn, we must take that pain to God and process it before Him. We must turn our eyes to God, which is unfortunate because so many people, they refuse to do that. Which is sad because it's only in God that we find a friend who is actually faithful throughout all the trials of life, who will never abandon us, and who is committed to satisfying us each and every morning by His steadfast love. By His steadfast love. But are we satisfied with His steadfast love? Or do we seek to establish ourselves? Do we seek to find that satisfaction in what the world can give us? No, the world can never give you that satisfaction. No. Number your days. And understand in the deepest part of your soul that nothing will be able to satisfy you but the steadfast love of God. And that satisfaction you can find whether you're 5, whether you're 25, 50, 80, 120, it doesn't matter. Throughout every phase and stage of your life, that steadfast love of God is that firm foundation throughout all generations. And that steadfast love will remain a firm foundation for you for all eternity. And you might not know how, but do you trust Him? In this life you will have troubles, but take heart, He has overcome the world. So set your hearts on the only God who is life. And as you age and approach your death, let the steadfast love of God be your joy and your peace, for only it could ever satisfy. Amen.
Thank you, Jeremy. I received word this week that a woman who was my mentor when we were in Pakistan has now entered a hospice. And when I got the news of that, I immediately cried. And then I thought, why am I crying? She's tired. She wants to go home. She's 95. But Jeremy said it very well. Death was never meant to be. And we sorrow for those that we lose. But we have an everlasting God. We're going to repeat the song that we sang before because it basically is singing this psalm back to God. Let's stand together.
Oh God, before the mountains were brought forth, or days of spring and summer filled the earth, from night when joy and tragedy collide, and loss reminds us life is but a sigh from everlasting. You are God, and all our days are held within your hands. Your perfect love and favor have no end. We rest within the wisdom of your plan, everlasting God. O God of light, our ways are known to you, but by your grace you're making all things new. So satisfy us in our numbered days. Establish every effort while we wait. From everlasting, you are God, and all our days are held within your hands. Your perfect love and favor have no end. We rest within the wisdom of your plan, everlasting, and all our days are held within your hands. Your perfect love and favor have no end. We rest within the wisdom of your plan, everlasting God.
For our benediction, I'm going to read Psalm 23, because I feel like that kind of encapsulates a lot. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and steadfast love shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. One piece.
Remember to get your children.